Now, a book for toddlers and preschoolers depicting a transgender man who wears women's clothes and lipstick, as well as a horse who believes it's a dog, has been published in Sweden, sparking very mixed reactions. Well, we're going to discuss the issues raised and cross live to David Curtin, a spokesman from the United Kingdom Independence Party, and Peter Tatchell, a human rights campaigner. Welcome to the programme, both of you. I'm going to start with you, David. What's not to like about this book? Isn't it preparing the children for a very diverse world that we live in now, with all sorts of people, minority groups of all kinds, and this is just one of those minority groups, isn't it?
Well, it is a minority group, and when you're an adult, when you're over 18, you're entitled to do what you want in the privacy of your own home, and I don't think anyone would disagree with that. But propagandising this kind of thing to children, who, it can damage them in their natural development as boys and girls. Nature is binary. Nature creates male and female. There are boys and girls, and we hear, as well as the book, moves to try and ban the words boys and girls, men and women, mothers and fathers in primary education, and this is a time when children really need to be affirmed in their identity as who they are, and this is just something that's far too much, too young. It's going to confuse people, and children are imaginative. They play, they pretend to be all kinds of things. They pretend to be footballers, they pretend to be aliens, spacemen, unicorns, they maybe pretend to be men and women as well, but you have to separate imagination and play from objective scientific fact. And the fact is that your gender or your biological sex is defined by your anatomy and by your chromosomes, and that's the science that we need to be making sure that children know, and the science that we need to be teaching children and affirm them in growing up in.
Peter, David's using, quite strong words there: damaging, imagination, play, bringing the word issues. What are your thoughts about this? Do you think that the book places too much emphasis on those minority groups?
Well, transgender people exist in every society and have done all throughout history. And when there have been scientific studies of animal species, transgenderism has also been found in non-human animals. So it is part of the natural spectrum of life for all animal species, human and non-human. This book is not about promoting or encouraging transgenderism. It's about trying to affirm young people who don't feel they fit neatly into the male-female roles, and trying to tackle bullying and prejudice. We know that in Britain, for example, nearly half of all young transgender people have attempted suicide. Nearly half. That's a shocking statistic, and we need to try and reduce that, not just in Britain, but in every country. And I think any book like this one that seeks to promote understanding and respect for people who are different, that's fantastic, because we want to live in a kind, gentle, compassionate society.
David, Peter mentioned some figures there, and surveys show that the number of children questioning their gender identities in Sweden, which is where this book was written, is doubling annually. So there is a need for a book like this, and the author, I just want to point out that the author, does have a PhD in genetics and biology, and she said she was inspired after meeting several students who had gone through gender transitions. So do you agree that there is a requirement for children to be exposed to a book like this?
No, I don't. I mean, yes, the figures are at the moment, it's doubling every year in Sweden, but that's because children in schools are being exposed to this kind of material, and that's very, very new. All through history, yes, there may be a few, very small number of people who are transgender, and then, particularly when they were adults, but it's never been an issue in primary school until about 2015, if you look at this country. There was, the law was changed, I think 2002, to allow people to register to change their gender if they wanted to, and they had to go through a 2-year process of living as the opposite gender. Now, in 12 years, there were 4,500 people in total who registered to change their gender. But since we've actually started bringing this teaching into schools, the number has rocketed in the United Kingdom. So I think this isn't a problem that's entirely artificial, because because people have tried to do this first of all to children who are 14 and 15, and then children who are 10, 11, then 7, and now it's 5-year-olds and 4-year-olds, and this book in Sweden is going to 2-year-old children, 3-year-old children in preschool. And when children are 2 and 3, they're not thinking about this kind of thing. They want to play, they want to be imaginative, but exposing children to this kind of idea that they're not boys, they're not girls, that's something that can come later on if they want to think about it, 16, 17, 18, when they're adults. And the very damaging thing about this is then they're encouraged to take puberty blocking hormones, and in some cases encouraged to have operations where they have operations done on their reproductive organs, and that's something that they can never reverse. And we do hear situations of people who have been encouraged into that, and then they've changed their minds 1 or 2 years later, but they're stuck with what they've done. There's play and imagination, but it's different to actually the real case, the real mental condition of gender dysphoria, which needs to be properly diagnosed medically and people given help for that. And the number of people who have that is far, far less than the number of people who are just playing and going through the natural process of life.
Peter, does David have a point there? If young children are given that the power to choose what gender they want to be, that they might change their mind?
Well, no one's going to change their mind just because they read a book. It's something that comes deep from within, and no amount of propaganda or proselytizing can make someone transgender. I think our starting point has to be the welfare of the child. And my concern is that we know in countries all across the world, pupils who don't fit the gender stereotypes, who are trans or gender variant, they suffer teasing, name-calling, threats and bullying, and that is truly shameful. That is not good for the child's welfare. So what we have to do is to create an atmosphere and understanding where it's okay to be different. That doesn't mean to say that we're saying it's a good thing or a bad thing or something to be encouraged, but that if people are different, that they're not picked upon and bullied. And from there, then of course, eventually, children will come to their own conclusion. And if they are trans, that's their choice, that's fine. If they're not, or they change their mind, that's also fine. But the one thing we've got to stop is the prejudice and bigotry that trans kids face. And that statistic of about half of all young trans pupils in our schools in Britain attempting suicide, we've got to stop that. And books like this can help do that.
David, I mean, Peter has said that reading a book is not going to change that child's mind, and you're arguing that, imagination could indeed change that child's mind. What about dressing up? Children dress up all the time, don't they? They wear, male clothes, female clothes. It's not gender specific. What do you think about those kind of games? Do you think those should be banned too?
No, absolutely not. But, I do agree with Peter that, of course, bullying is bad, unkindness is bad. We want to stop that. We want to stop bullying. But that's a different issue from trying to identify children as being trans when they may just be dressing up. They may enjoy dressing up. They may enjoy playing. They may be boys and girls who are not stereotypically what you might think as the macho boy. I mean, that's a sort of stereotype that's going away. But, you might identify a boy who doesn't do typical male play, but that doesn't mean that they're trans. It doesn't even mean that they're gay. It just means that they enjoy, doing different things to other boys, or girls doing different things to other girls. And to try to find those people and identify them as something at a very early age and put a label on them is wrong. And this is something that never happened until 2 or 3 years ago. People were just left to play, do what they want, and then they can, decide and think about those kind of things later. But it is damaging if these puberty blocking hormones are available on the NHS and are being prescribed to people children as young as 10. So this is an issue if you're going into primary schools and people are trying to identify people as trans and then operating and giving them chemicals and doing physical surgical operations. This is absolutely wrong to be doing this to anyone under the age of 18 when they're an adult and when they're old enough to make their own decisions.
Yeah, Peter.
Can I just say that?
Go ahead.
Can I just say that this book does not seek to label anyone as anything. It's not about pressuring young people to become trans or to change their gender. There's no attempt to identify trans kids. The purpose is to create a kind, respectful atmosphere in the school or the playgroup, so that those kids who aren't, you know, the macho boy or the feminine girl, that they're not victimized, they're not bullied. It's not about hormone blockers or gender reassignment. This is simply about creating understanding and compassion towards people who are different. You know, the right to be different is a fundamental human right. And you're absolutely correct. Some kids will experiment and they won't proceed further. But let them experiment and let's not have them bullied. Let's recognize that human gender is a very diverse thing. There's probably none of us that are 100% male or 100% female. You know, we're all probably a bit of a mixture. Most of us err towards the male end or the female end, but there are people in between. And let them be in between if that's the way they are. And if they're kids, so be it. Let them play an experiment. And let's protect them against prejudice by educating all kids that it's okay to be different.
Peter, if we look at this book specifically, it is aimed at toddlers as well as, you know, a little bit older. Is there a need for toddlers to be thinking about transgender issues, if they can understand it?
Well, of course, young people at a very early age become aware of gender issues because of the toys they're given, because of what they hear their parents or other kids say around them. So I think it's really positive to, you know, bring them a gentle awareness of these issues, particularly if they, the kids themselves, are confused or uncertain or perhaps experimenting with their gender. If they're perhaps think that they may be a different gender from which they've been assigned at birth, then I think it's really positive that they hear a message that that's okay. This book is not about saying you have to act or you have to do this or we're going to do something to you. It's just simply saying if you are a bit different, if your gender is different from the norm, don't be upset, don't feel bad about it, don't develop depression or anxiety, and if you see other kids like this, don't bully them, don't name call them, don't treat them badly, treat them with respect. And I think that culture, from a young age, most young kids understand that. They get the message. I think it's adults who are panicked about this issue, whereas young kids are able to take it on board.
David, you were shaking your head a bit there when Peter was talking. It is only a children's book. Why are you still objecting to this?
It's because of the issue. I mean, it's actually delving into something that young minds are far too young to deal with and cope with. And this idea of gender and changing sex, it's not something that has ever been something that people consider naturally at a young age. And there is gender confusion and gender chaos coming into very young primary school kids. And the numbers are growing. You said at the beginning of the piece, it's growing by 100% every year in Sweden. The number of children who refer themselves. In Britain, it's in the last 2 years, it's grown sixfold, the number of children who have this gender confusion. And it's because they're being exposed to these materials. If they weren't, they would just happily go on their own way, being boys and girls. Yes, there are differences in people who are boys and differences in girls and their temperaments and their behaviour and their likes and dislikes, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be transgender. It doesn't mean that...
Okay, listen, we're going to have to end it there, I'm afraid.
It's a new social construct.
Brilliant. Okay, David Curtin, UKIP London Assembly member and UKIP spokesperson, Peter Tatchell, human rights campaigner and director of the Peter Tatchell Foundation. Thank you both for coming onto the programme and airing those views. Thanks.
Thank you.